Spider-Man 2 has got some crazy improvements over the previous two games in the franchise, and while that is obviously a very, very good thing for us as players, it means there is plenty of new mechanics to take in, which then results in a lot of it being missed by many players out there. Because of that, today we're going to be going through 7 things you didn't know you could do in Spider-Man 2. Now, by the time I figured out this first one, I was probably about 10 or so hours into the game, so it makes me feel like a bit of an idiot, to be honest, but this one is that you can web zip through any surface in the game, not just the ones that we see with the little circle reticle that shows on your screen that pretty much makes it seem like you can only zip to set locations. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about here, the little circle on your screen when you are moving around the map, that pretty much shows you that if you press L2 and R2, it will zip you towards that location. And generally speaking, this is only on the edges of buildings, for example, maybe on a lamppost. It looks as though there are only certain places that we can actually zip to. Now, that is actually not correct at all. I did not notice that straight away. If you actually aim in first with L2, aim at your target and then press R2, that will zip you to pretty much anywhere you can go. Now, it does have a range on it, so it's not unlimited range, but anywhere within your range, whether it's a flat surface or, up on top of a wall, it doesn't really matter. You can essentially do the web zip to anywhere that you want to go. Now, this is really good for a bit more control over your movement. You don't just have to zip to the top of a wall, for example. You can actually zip halfway up and then do the typical spider crawl the rest of the way up. You can even do it onto, a ceiling to where you are actually walking upside down like Spider-Man does. So definitely take advantage of this. It is not only a really fun way to play, but it is actually very useful when it comes to navigating the map. Now, the next one is actually pretty similar to the first one in that it is, I guess, to do with the movement, and it is something the game does not really tell you. Now, I think it does mention it very early on because I do remember seeing it pop up on the HUD, but it doesn't actually give you a proper warning. It doesn't say anything about it. It just gives you a very quick prompt, and it is very, very easy to miss. Now, what this one is actually being able to perch up on top of a wall. This gives you a lot more control over your movement when you are, on the edge of a building or something like that, and you're maybe trying to look down and be stealthy on the enemies who are down below. All you need to do is press L3 when you are on the ledge, and instead of sort of freely walking around and actually having the risk of falling off, there's been plenty of times when I'm on the edge of a building trying to, set up a takedown on an enemy, and what do you know, I accidentally fall off and my cover's blown. Well, doing this will perch you in that typical Spider-Man sort of crouch, and then it can be a lot easier when it comes up to setting up those bits of stealthy gameplay. Now, before we go any further, if you guys are enjoying the video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. We are well on the way to 1K subscribers now. And if you are enjoying the content, it would massively help the channel if you guys do drop a sub. Now, the next one is a pretty funny one, to be honest, and this is that you can actually do the Spider-Man pointing meme. Now, if you guys have done a lot of the crime fighting around the city where you are just wandering around and then you get a bit of a crime update that something is happening, someone is committing a crime throughout the city. Well, when you go and fight these enemies, there is actually a random chance that the other Spider-Man can show up and pretty much help you win that fight. And if that does happen, once you take out all the enemies, you can actually walk up to them afterwards and press triangle, and it will give you the chance of doing the Spider-Man pointing meme, as well as actually plenty of other animations too. It won't happen every single time. It is a bit more rare from what I can tell, but regardless, it is a really, really fun thing to do, and it shows a great sense of humor from the developers that they actually put this in the game. I'm sure you guys have seen the Spider-Man pointing meme where there are multiple Spider-Man pointing at each other, and like I said, this is a great touch from the developers. Now, the next one is probably the most useful thing in this whole video, in my opinion. This is the fact that web wings can actually pretty much stop on a dime. Now, obviously web wings are really, really good, but it does make it pretty hard to land on top of a building. If you're flying at, crazy speeds and you have to land on a smaller building top, for example, that can actually be pretty hard, and the momentum makes it very hard to aim where you're going. Now, to counteract that, all you need to do is simply pull back on the left stick and then press circle. And as you can see, it will stop you dead in your tracks and you will pretty much just fall to the ground, and it can pretty much make you land wherever you want to land. So this one definitely helps a lot when it comes to the maneuverability. And if you do need to land on a very specific point, this makes it a hell of a lot easier. Now, speaking of the web wings, there is something else that you can actually do with them that I did not know initially, and this is that you can actually surf across the water if you just sort of land on the water when you are flying with those web wings. Not only is this just a really cool animation and looks awesome seeing Spider-Man pretty much surfing on the water, but this does actually keep your speed going, and so you can pretty much do this continuously and just float along the water without needing to have anything to grab onto. This makes crossing the city a hell of a lot easier. Yes, there are some wind tunnels that make it pretty easy as well. And to be fair, they are definitely a lot faster, but they're probably not as cool as this. And like I said, you can do this essentially infinitely. You can pretty much just keep jumping, go back into the web wing, and then land on the water again. You will surf for a little bit, make sure to jump again, and you can just do that on repeat essentially forever. It makes traversal across water a hell of a lot easier. Now, the last two are actually just settings. Firstly, a lot of people don't know that you can actually set shortcut buttons, which are mapped to both the left and the right button on the D-pad. And with those, you can choose a heap of different options that allow you to use those as shortcuts instead of their originally mapped buttons. Now, to be fair, I haven't changed any of the actual combat moves to these shortcuts because I feel like the combat is mapped out really well on the controller and I don't really want to toy around with that all that much. With that being said, changing it to these shortcuts doesn't actually remove the initial mapping. And so it is still worth it if there's a few abilities that you really like using, but they're maybe hard to remember or it's hard for you to press those buttons in combination. You can simply change those to those shortcuts. Or you can do what I've done and actually set the app and the photo mode to both of those shortcuts, as it just makes them both a little bit easier to use. Now, as for the last setting, there is a setting found in the gameplay section of those settings that allows you to actually auto heal, which sounds pretty OP at face value, to be honest. But you do obviously need to have enough focus meter filled, which if you guys have played enough, you'll know that you do need to have that focus meter filled in order to heal. Now, with this setting, you can choose between either 10, 30, or 50% health. And whichever one you choose, that will be the point at which it will automatically kick in and heal for you. So for example, you may have that focus meter filled, and then if you choose the 30% option, when your health gets to 30% or below, it will just automatically heal for you. And it can be very, very clutch in a lot of situations. Now, keep in mind, the focus meter is obviously tied to the finishes as well. And so having this setting turned on will unfortunately pretty much remove your ability to do finishes unless you are at, 50% or above health. It essentially means if you're on, say, 30% and you want to do a finisher, well, it will just automatically kick in and use that focus, at which point you can no longer do that finisher. And so it is kind of removing the option for you. So it doesn't completely remove the ability to do finishes. Obviously, if you have 100% health, when that focus meter is full, you can still do the finishes, but in those situations where it gets to the threshold that you've set, then unfortunately it will remove that option. So just keep that in mind, but outside of that, it is still very, very handy. And I find that it is really handy if you do find yourself getting overwhelmed in fights where there are lots of enemies. When there's so many things going on, sometimes it is actually really helpful to make the game essentially heal for you. But anyway, those are 7 things that you might not have known you can do in Spider-Man 2. I'm keen to hear some of your own recommendations as well, so be sure to leave them down in the comment section. Like I mentioned, if you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We will be doing a setup tour at 1K subscribers. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.